Hi and welcome to another short video of how to do things in Axway Managed File Transfer. In this video I'm going to describe a secure transport use case where I can use an advanced routing workflow to send files to an Azure Blob which can be submitted from multiple different user accounts. So let's have a look at the requirements to set this up. So I'm going to need a user account who's going to perform the actual download from the S3 bucket. I'm going to need the usual information for the S3 location. I'm going to need an Azure Blob transfer site as well. So for this use case, I'm going to store the Azure Blob transfer site within kind of a shared account. I've called it a routing account, but it's not any specific secure transport terminology. Once I have that config shared within the routing account, I can then go ahead and configure an advanced routing workflow to create a template, which I can then assign to multiple users as they come on board. So the idea here is I store the Azure Blob transfer site and configuration in one spot. If I need to change it at any point in time, I can go and change it in one place rather than a scenario where you would have multiple blobs with basic applications where you'd have to go and revisit every single transfer flow. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let's get into building it. Okay, so I'm now going to need a couple of user accounts for this use case. The first one is going to be the account that downloads the file from S3. So my stock standard user here, I'm going to call it from S3. And in this case, I don't expect this user is going to log on, so I'm not going to create any login credentials for it. Just go ahead and save that account. Now I'll create the S3 transfer site. And because I'm downloading from this site, I'm just going to need to configure the download settings. So I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm going to specify my download location. So this is where I'm going to pull files from. And using a regular expression here, I'm going to exclude any file with a .done extension. So the reason for that is I'm going to then set a post-transmission setting here. So after I download the file successfully, I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to rename the file after it's downloaded, so the downloads directory, and then a variable here for the target file name with a .done extension. To get some more examples of the variables that we have to work with, there's this tooltip here, and this will give you a series of examples that you can use for renaming, etc. Additionally, if you go to the help and the offline documentation, there's this expression language section here, which has got a lot of detail and there's quite a lot of variables available. So the reason I'm setting this up is I want to download everything and I want to rename it .done, and then I'm excluding further downloads with this .done extension, meaning that I'm going to download the file once and I'm not going to keep re-downloading it. The next thing I'm going to need is another user account, which is going to be my routing account, where the files are going to be pushed to the Azure Blob. So I'm going to add this and I'm going to call it Azure Hub account. And in this case, I'm definitely not going to have anyone log onto this account. It's purely going to facilitate routing, so I'm not going to create a login. Save there. So that should be the hub account created. The next step is for me to create the transfer site. So to generate some credentials for Azure Blob transfer site, I'm going to navigate to the Blob location in my Azure console. I'm going to click on the properties and I'm going to generate a SAS token. So I'm going to assign relevant permissions here for it and the expiry date. So I'm going to set this for a few months in the future, sometime next year, and this should be all I need, and I'll hit the generate button. So I'm going to need the bottom, the SAS URL here, which I'm going to copy and store for pasting into my transfer site later. So now that I have some credentials for my Azure Blob and a user account set up, I'm going to go ahead and create the Azure transfer site. So I'm going to select Azure Blob storage, and then I can choose the method that I'm going to connect with. In this case, I'm going to use my SAS. I'm going to paste that in there, and what I should see is these fields get populated from the URL that I've pasted in there. So in this case I'm doing an upload, which means I don't need to fill in anything for the download settings. For the uploads, I'm going to put a placeholder value there called inbound, and I'm going to make sure that I check this box here to allow overwrite. So what's going to happen when I execute this transfer flow, I'm going to overwrite the upload folder for each individual user, and then I'm going to populate the directory with some user specific information. So that should be all I need here. I'm going to hit save and move on to the next step. Now that I have my account and transfer site set up, I've got everything I need to complete my route package. So I'll navigate to the routes menu and click a new package. I'm going to call it Azure Route. I'm going to assign the business units. And I'm not going to worry about execution rules at this point because this is a pretty simple route with one rule. And I'm going to complete a new routing rule. So send to Azure. I don't have to worry about expressions because this is always going to be executed. And I'm going to add a single step in here, which is going to be a send to partner step. Add step. And now I need to specify an account. So this is where my shared transfer site is going to come in. So if I start typing the account name, Azure Hub, I should see the public transfer sites here. So I'm going to click Blob. And now the config I need to set up here is override the upload folder. So I'm going to call it inbound, which I want as the root folder. And then I'm going to set this expression up here for account name. So what this is going to do is it's going to take the account name that executes the route. So once I assign this to an end user, and it will use that as the upload folder. So it'll be inbound account name. I've got my various retry settings here, which I'm just going to leave as default. I can also set the number of parallel transfers if I need, if I want to restrict that down, if I've got a site that can't handle a lot of concurrent uploads, I can set that there. But everything else I can leave as defaults. So I'll hit save, save again, and save again. Yes, you do need to click it 3 times. And that should be ready to go. So now I've got my advanced route ready to assign to my end user. So that's all the hard work done now. I've got the route complete. This is basically an end-to-end flow contained within a route package. I'll now go and assign it to a user. So if I've got a user that I created earlier, which is from S3, I'll go to the from S3 user in the route tab here. I can then select Azure Route and assign it to the user. And so you see a few things here. I've inherited a bunch of template rules, which in this case is a single send to the Azure site. I could add additional rules here if I needed to, user specific rules, but in this case I don't. This is completely self-contained. So I'll go ahead and save that, after giving it a name, of course. And that should be ready to go. So the next thing I need to do for this user is to assign them a subscription. So the route on its own doesn't do anything. I need to tie it again with a subscription. So everything in SecureTransport is executed via a subscription. In this case, I'm going to use an advanced routing subscription. Hit subscribe, and I'll give it something meaningful like to Azure. And then I'm going to have to select where I download from. So in this case, I've got my demo bucket to download from. And I've got my push to Azure route that's going to execute. So what's going to happen now is every time a file is either uploaded into this directory, so I could initiate this by doing an upload into the to Azure folder, or as I wanted to configure, I need to pull this from the bucket, and then once a file lands in here, it's then going to execute this push to Azure route. So with advanced routing, I've got a lot more control over what I do with the files and how they're executed, but in this case, I'm just going to purely select delete once we've routed the file. So at the conclusion of the route, if it's successful, I'm going to delete it. And let's hit add there, and we should be ready to test. So to test, firstly we're going to need a source file on our S3 bucket. So if I check here in my downloads location, I've got test file 3. Okay, so that should be ready to go. Now all I need to do is trigger the subscription from my S3 account. So go to the subscription. Now I could have this running on a periodic schedule, or I could actually be triggering this through a Lambda function and an API. But in this case I'm going to trigger it here. I'm going to hit retrieve files now. And what should happen on the S3 side is once the file's downloaded, refresh this, and it's been renamed to .done. So the next time I execute this download, it's not going to pull the same file. So back on SecureTransport now, we can verify the logs through the file tracking window, and you'll see here I've got a download from my S3 bucket and a push to my Azure Blob. So let's just check the logs to see if it's doing what we're expecting. So in here I can see my S3 download. Let's pull from the download location into the account folder, which is my subscription folder, and I should see a post-transmission setting somewhere in this log. Yeah, so it's successfully renamed the file to downloaded download.done. Okay, so that's all good for the S3 side of things. Then the route's been executed and it's pushed the file to the Azure Blob location. The remote folder in this case is remote inbound from S3, which is what we're expecting because the account name is from S3. It's executing the file. And again, that's been sent and it's had the local delete execute. So the end-to-end flow looks to be completed as I was expecting. So just to highlight where this routing becomes useful is if I have a scenario where I need a lot of my users to send to the same Azure Blob location, it's now a simple case for me to go and just update individual users. So I'll take user 2 for example. If I need to give them the capability to send to this Azure location, I'll go to routes here, I'll assign them the Azure route. I don't need to do any local config apart from the name. I'll hit save, and again under the subscriptions tab I'll give them a subscription to be able to send to this Azure location. So to Azure, I'm not going to worry about downloading for this account. This is going to be a client upload in this case, and then I'm going to execute the Azure route. I'm going to delete the file after it's been sent, the same way I did in the last case. So what that looks like for this user 2 here, is when I log in, they'll have the subscription, and I'll send my test file 3 in this case. And we see that getting deleted immediately, so I'm pretty confident that's worked, but I'll just go back to the logs to check. And then I can see file tracking. So in addition to my from S3 account executing this route, I've now added it to user 2 as well. So they've uploaded through HTTP and it's sent to the same blob location. So this becomes really useful if I need to change anything at the blob. I don't have to go and revisit a subscription from every user account. I can change this template config in one place only. Anyway, I hope that highlights some of the useful capabilities of advanced routing. I'm going to continue with another couple of use cases of the next couple of videos for routing, and I hope that's going to explain a little bit more. Anyway, that concludes this video. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out and ask. Thank you. Bye.